Welcome to the session. I am so excited to be back as a moderator. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to introduce our first presenter, Giangelo from Food Exploration and Discovery. We'll be presenting community composition. Oh my gosh, I'm off to a great start. Let me start over. Hold on. Community composting with invertebrates, programs, pillbugs, and people power. So could we please welcome Gio to the stage? Hello. There in the center, it will be your timekeeper. There you go, and she's going to give you increments of 13, 8, 3, and 1.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, hi everybody. This is my very cute slide presentation that my fellows helped put together. So anything that's cute, you can't thank me for that. You can thank somebody else. But I'm Giangelo Leos. Gio has fewer vowels. I'm the Education and Program Director at Food Ed. I know very little about food other than sort of the pre-production of food and the post-production. I'm on the invertebrate soil side of what we do at Food Ed, but I'm the co-founder of Food Ed, and I'll talk about what we do. So at Food Ed, we run school and community gardens. We have 14 sites with some pollinator, native plant composting spaces. We have 5 community gardens. We run K through 12 programming. We have compost hubs throughout the San Gabriel Valley. That's in LA County. And we do a lot. We've been doing this for about 5 years, and it's been a whirlwind. What we do generally, so you can see it visually, we turn spaces that are largely unused and turn it into vibrant educational spaces for students, for schools and communities to interact and get a little piece of nature back into their lives. Here's another example of a community garden space at a church that is now a thriving hub on a corner that folks can go to. So that's what we do. What today I'm talking about is California's Senate Bill 1383, which is California's attempt at reducing food waste and a big reduction of what goes into our landfill. Everybody in California has to compost now. Everybody has to do that because fining starts in 2025. That's tomorrow, basically. Nobody knows how to do this quite yet. And so in California, it's a great goal to try to reduce food waste that is going into landfill, but nobody knows how to do it quite yet. And so I'll be talking about sort of how our nonprofit and our work is using invertebrates and people power is the through line to help folks learn about how to do that. So as we know, methane production is rampant. If we're talking about just in California alone, landfill, organics in landfill produce 20% of the methane in California. And so we need to address that, right? When we're talking about soils in California, the FAO is talking about the majority of soils in the world are expected to fail by 2025, or expected to be in decline, the quality of our soils. Carbon is not staying captured in our soils, the quality of our soils is declining, and about 1 soccer field worth of soil is eroding every 5 seconds globally. So through the lens of thinking about soil with invertebrates, we talk about how invertebrates can help recarbonize the soil, specifically at the local level. And that's sort of what my work at Food Ed is about, is closing food gaps, addressing food insecurity in communities, and educating communities by talking about food waste, soil, and invertebrates. So when we're talking about a law that is affecting everybody in the state of California, it's something that's scary for a lot of folks. It's an imposition, it's the new recycling, we like to say, but who here has a perfect handle on recycling right now? Raise your hand. Yeah, I don't either, right? We don't know how to do these things perfectly. And now there's new stuff that has to go into new bins, into new places, and nobody knows how to do it quite yet. So this is something that is a big concern for every single person now in the state. And so our nonprofit, we're seeing it at the local level as the vehicle, at the lens to refocus. How do we make this accessible for communities? How do we make this fun for communities? How do we get people to actually think about this in a positive way? And we do that through thinking about our work through a community scale. These are some of our hissing cockroaches, meeting some of middle schoolers in our programming, also meeting the mayor in the city that we're located, and then going all the way to meet the governor of California. And so our worms and cockroaches are the same thing that we're doing with middle schoolers is getting all the way to our governor. We're doing our best to make this accessible by taking that community model, the work we're doing at local level, and not seeing it as any different between the communities that are neighboring us. To the north of us. Everybody knows California is a very big state, and it's not a one-size-fit-all thing. Composting isn't, food waste reduction isn't, but how can we use invertebrates to maybe be that through line? So we manage large composting hubs like this one right here, and I'll be talking about how we take food waste into these bins, and then sort of the three organisms that we're working with largely to make composting more accessible. We'll talk about black soldier flies, worms, a different variety of worms, and isopods. Thank you. So we know that invertebrates are very good at managing soils. It's something that is inherent in the majority of our soil management practices, is to actually just let a lot of invertebrates do the work themselves. So in our programming, we're using people power and pillbug power is what I like to say, to get this work done and make it more accessible. Getting folks to think about doing this work, and then also letting the invertebrates that we're managing to do the work too. So in these larger community compost bins, we're able to process about 8 to 10 tons of food waste a year. In them, we have very little control of the invertebrates that are in them. So we do have a wide diversity of invertebrates that are inside of the compost bins, but we also get a lot of community inputs and diversity of participation and a diversity of invertebrates. So we have very little control over what goes into these bins, but to date we've been able to process about 80,000 pounds of food waste inside of these bins, and that's no small metric. We're not a waste hauler that's able to do 80 times that amount in about 1 month, but it's still something at the local community level that's working for us. We're also doing vermicomposting in small bins and multi-dwelling units. And I'll talk about that in a sec. If anybody wants to know about the worms that we're working with, I'll gladly go. This is a slide I want to talk about, but I only have 18 minutes, so that's that. But our worm bins that we're using, we make sure that every third grade classroom in our program has a worm bin. That's sort of where we're starting with invertebrates with third graders. And we also have some industrial bins that we're managing at some of these school sites to capture some of the cafeteria food waste. Those individual bins range in size from a 5-gallon bucket that lives in the kids' classroom to a larger bin that goes out to the kids' school garden. And then in multi-dwelling units where folks maybe don't have even access to a trash can that they use individually, we're looking at worm bins in parking garages and how to capture some of that food waste in spaces where that's a largely underutilized corner of a parking structure. Well, we can put some worm bins there. On small batch material, what's coming out of our composting bins, sort of our larger composting bins, we're actually doing a little bit more with isopods and millipedes as that becoming part of the substrate mixture that's getting digested further. So we're able to use the existing invertebrates in our programming that already go to our schools, and then also able to break down feedstocks like rice hulls or brewer's mash from local breweries that's not able to be processed in some of our larger material bins. A few of the species that we work with as well. And so then I call this our isopotting mix. It's a great product, and it's really a way to turn substrate into something usable and sort of these as a compostable compost product. It's not really called isopotting mix. I just made that up, but I should be marketing that. It's a great idea. And then our black soldier fly composting is actually sort of really the fastest vehicle that we're seeing used in our larger community garden spaces. We use a few methods like the Purdue Extension method for bin creation and the Acorn Land Labs biopod combo program. These are working well, but they're not at a scale yet that I can really speak too much about what we're doing with them. But we are able to get some frass output that's great for going back into those programs. And we're actually able to start a lot of our feedstock from spent coffee grounds from local coffee shops in town. So the combination of this, what we call our triple digestion compost, starts with that community compost, people bringing in their food scraps, the community composting it themselves, and then our worms, isopods, and black soldier flies sort of as this through line of material getting composted and worked through with invertebrates. So what do we do with that compost and what becomes of that material? We're getting to use that in our urban habitat that we're supporting at schools and community gardens. We're doing soil restoration in spaces that have been untouched, and then we're also able to grow food. I throw food in there because we're food ed, and so I have to talk about food at some point. But we do, hundreds and hundreds of pounds of squash every year. So this is an example of sort of one of the spaces that is left untouched at a school. We're able to turn it into a small native habitat. The kids are able to go out and see some pollinators. So through that, when we're talking about how we're doing that work at Food Ed, we run a lot of workshops and community, community programming. We host what's called Food Waste Champion Day. We host Compost Palooza. All of these events are sort of reimagining, making this stuff fun and engaging for communities. I mean, yeah, everybody in this room knows that working with worms and isopods and millipedes is fun, but getting it out to the general public and making it accessible is something that's sort of a through line of what we do. We're also doing community microscopy. We're taking samples of the compost that we're producing, and we're taking our invertebrates to classrooms, to schools, to communities to show them who is doing that work, and they're getting to meet them up close. That's a picture of a pregnant tardigrade. I love that picture so much. We have tons of tardigrades in our compost, which a lot of our master composter friends are saying is very impressive. So I'm impressed by it too. We also do a lot of municipal education. The general public has to be, is face-to-face with composting, is face-to-face with food waste reduction. And so we have to also continue to make it accessible, and we at Food Ed try to make it fun. Some of my favorite students, we serve thousands and thousands of students that get to meet these isopods that are also still doing that work of breaking down their material. Their substrate is part of our composting process. It goes into some of our inputs, and the kids get to meet them as well. And then the bigger piece of sort of what we're doing is that volunteer aspect. One of our larger partnerships with the governor's office is to activate members of our community to do the work, to turn the compost, to feed the isopods, to work with the millipedes, and to meet the cockroaches. And so what we're doing is activating members of our community that want to give back. And maybe there's folks that aren't ready to lift a shovel or a pitchfork and turn the compost, or to get out into a garden and plant something, but they can get involved by feeding our isopods, collecting food waste in their community, and activating people to do more for the betterment of their community locally. So what we're seeing is an opportunity to keep the food waste cycle as a cycle in our community that stays local and stays close to the source, where the food waste that's going into our community is staying with the invertebrates. It's going back into the community in that soil restoration, in that food production, and then it's producing more that goes back into that cycle. And so those invertebrates get to be part of that story, and the people get to be part of that cyclical story. It just repeats all the time. A few resources if anyone wants to talk about those, but I will happily send those out in a email. But I just want to leave you all with doing the rot thing. What we've been able to do with invertebrates and thinking about community composting is we can reimagine what community resources look like. We're able to keep compost local. We're able to keep soil local and keep the work of not letting this stuff go to another state, not let this stuff go to another city, but seeing the food waste itself, instead of being something that everybody is forced to do, everybody has to do this, it's an opportunity to reclaim the opportunity for tapping into how this can support your community instead of being something that we all have to figure out and groan about. Like I was saying, in California, everybody's going to have to do this. By 2025, fines are going to be levied on cities. So cities are freaking out right now, right? We had a little bit of a lull because of COVID to address being ready for this, but it's go time for communities. So our nonprofit is able to really take that community model of the same cockroach, the same worm, or same cockroach and worm from the same colony maybe, went to meet the mayor of our city, went to meet the governor, but keep that through line of keeping resources local. We can expand it to more communities. So thank you. I tried to go really fast because normally I'm used to 3-hour presentations. Wow, did I do it under time? Yeah. Yay! Oh, great. So I can answer some questions, but thank you very much. This is my contact information, and I hope anybody reaches out with some questions, but I see a question in the back.
When you get this compost and it's finished, are you just spreading it on top of the soil, or are you picking a site that may not have a good output and fauna, and you spread it on and just rototill it and mix it with the whole soil?
Actually, we're doing almost no rototilling. What we're finding is we get more bacterial and fungal activity when we just leave it on the top. And we don't introduce, or when we sterilize, we make sure we aren't introducing any additional worms to the space. Thank you. But those invertebrates tend to do the rototilling for us. So we sort of track over about, one of our spaces we've tracked for about 3 years. In the no tillage spaces, the material has been tilled into about the top 2 inches of the soil. And it's also a lot easier to tell volunteers, just spread it. You don't have to do any digging or that kind of thing. Any other questions? Okay, I'll take that big round of applause now. Thank you.